Good evening, guys. Everybody, welcome. Welcome to the Lavender Library. This is exactly the purpose that we created this place to do. We are wanting to promote projects and make visible all of the queer scholarship that has been happening on campus for decades. I am incredibly thankful and blessed to have had Celine and Ginny in class this semester, and the topics that they had and the research that they have been doing and producing all semester is fantastic, and y'all need to hear it. So thank y'all for being here. Please get you something to eat and or drink. So Celine is going to go first. Ginny will go after that. Please just want to make this as informal and friendly. You're not going to get a friendlier audience.
It's true.
So, Celine, please tell us a little bit about what you have been doing this semester.
Yeah, so my paper is titled Queering Bangkok, Boys Love Genre, and Queer Activism in Thailand. And it's partially informed by my previous trip to Bangkok, where I saw queer culture sort of physically manifesting in a lot of different spaces in Bangkok, and also informed by the fact that I watch a lot of Thai BLs and I see activism happening in these shows that you don't see in similar counterparts in other countries, such as Japan, that has a very separate culture surrounding BLs. And so with that, I'd also like to just provide a content warning. There's a brief mention of suicide, a picture of a woman holding a gun to her head. There are no graphic depictions. Just wanted to let in. So I guess I'll start talking with what I like to call my queer pilgrimage to Bangkok. Earlier, back in the summer, I took a trip alone to Taipei in Taiwan and then Bangkok in Thailand. And I had a lot of reasons for doing so. I wanted to practice the Mandarin that I learned from my Chinese teacher, who is sitting here, and then my very, very rudimentary Thai. And then I wanted to also be able to take one big solo trip before a commitment to a full-time job. But I also wanted to visit two of the places that are really integral to my queer identity. Visiting Taipei was really important to me because it was the first Asian country to have marriage equality, which is really huge. And then Bangkok was also on that list because Bangkok is currently a leader of queer culture. It's a relatively affirming society. Every society has its problems, but Bangkok, as a queer person in Bangkok, you're going to feel pretty safe. And they're right on the verge of marriage equality. Their activists are working really hard to make it a reality, and they have government officials in place these days that are working with them to make it happen. And so part also of what drew me to Bangkok was the international success of the boys love genre. I started watching Thai BLs last year, and these are narratives of homoerotic relationships between men. And they're most often TV and web series. You have some graphic novels and some written novels, but they're not nearly as successful or popular. And my first Thai BL was Kin Porsche the series, which came out in 2022, so last year. And what I noticed compelling tropes, well-designed sets and shooting locations, dramatic soundtracks, captivating character development. And these are things that are becoming more typical of contemporary Thai BLs, what I would consider 2020 to the present. The domestic and international success of the BL genre, I found it has been physically manifested in Bangkok through queer affective advertising and through renowned shooting locations. And so when I went to Bangkok, as you can see on the right side over here, BL actors are used in promotion and advertising a lot. Not only advertising their own shows, but also they're used to advertise beauty products, food, basically anything. And so it's very, very normal to see a BL celebrity couple, whether or not they are a real couple or not, posing together in ads throughout the city. And then the picture right below that was a sponsorship event that happened in a really big mall that I was able to go to. And so things like that are really, really common in Bangkok. And so one of the scholars that I'm going to talk about in a little while calls this queer affective advertising. It is marketing that commodifies queerness, but whether or not its purpose is activism, it physically queerifies or queers the city or space in which it is. And so I want to go ahead and sort of say my thesis so that I can kind of be thinking about it as I work through my evidence. So through imagining Bangkok as a queer space, reflecting pertinent social issues and fostering celebrity activism, BL dramas play a constitutive role within type queer activism. And all of that will make more sense later. And so first, to understand the where we are right now with Thai BLs, we have to first understand the history of Thai queer cinema. So according to one of my sources, Dr. Sarhat Unaldi, there have been 2 waves of Thai queer cinema up to 2011. The first wave was in the 1980s. One such movie was this over here, The Last Song. In this first wave, we see katois, which are, it's an umbrella term for trans women and feminine presenting individuals assigned male at birth in Thailand. They're often grouped together, especially so in the 1980s. And typically they were depicted either as obnoxious comedic relief or hopeless romantics doomed to unrequited love and suicide. And so in The Last Song, the main character is a katoi, and she falls in love with a man who ultimately falls in love with a cisgender woman, and she kills herself as a result. So that was pretty typical of what queer cinema was in Thailand in the 1980s and 90s. Gender normative queer men or masculine presenting queer men were sparingly depicted because they were viewed more as perverted. This is largely because they were really the only people perceived as real homosexuals. Like katois were perceived as women who maybe had bad karma and weren't born in a female body, but they were still ultimately perceived as women. But masculine presenting queer men had a lot more stigma, and they were not often represented in film. The second wave happened in the early 2000s. Katois were depicted a lot more positively, such as in The Iron Ladies, which came out in 2000. They were typically like praised for their courage to be able to express themselves, for their originality. And in these movies, you would typically see them like fighting throughout the movie to be able to prove themselves and prove their worth. And through that, they were able to gain acceptance in society for like working really hard for it. And then also during this time, we see independent filmmakers who were often queer directors begin to depict relationships between masculine presenting men. And some of these were tragedies because something we see a lot in early queer cinema is that they don't really imagine a happy ending for queer people. And so we see a lot of tragedies, but there were some with happy endings that wanted to send a more positive message about queer men. And so within this framework, the inception of BL dramas in 2014 marked the beginning of the third wave. And I think that also in order to understand how Thai BLs contribute to queer activism, we have to understand the state of queer politics and activism in Bangkok right now. So the picture over here, this is from Bangkok Pride 2022. And then these are photos from Bangkok Pride 2023. I think that you can see a big difference. I mean, these are small pictures with a small scope, but I think you can see Bangkok Pride 2023 in comparison with last year was huge, unprecedentedly large. So Bangkok Pride was the first official Pride parade in Bangkok in 16 years. And it was preceded by the election of the new governor of Bangkok, Shadshart Sitipun. He was elected into office and he declared courses of action for remedying systemic discrimination against queer people, specifically trans people, and then addressing marriage equality. And so it was a good turnout for being the first Pride in over a decade, but it was not nearly as large as Bangkok Pride 2023 that had over 50,000 attendees, which was more than double the year before. And this Pride was also preceded by a big political event. The Prime Minister, who was also a former coup maker, was ousted in favor of parties promising reform for like marriage equality and other LGBTQ rights. So really quickly, this is the route of Bangkok Pride 2022. This is a really wealthy part of town, but it's also a very touristy, very foreign part of town. Like the hotel that I stayed in is here. So there's a lot of foreigners in this area. And so Bangkok Pride 2022 being set in a place in Bangkok with a higher concentration of foreigners sort of sent the message that it was catering more so to foreigners. However, this year's Pride Parade was smack dab in the center of town, like the busiest, most commercial, most happening part of town. The most prominent university is here. One of the most busy metro stations is here. It's a very intensely commercial area, and so it was a big upgrade in the Pride event's reputation to be happening in this part of town. And so I think and then I'd like to touch on the academic perspectives that are informing my paper, because in the recent couple of years, there have been more scholars who are engaging BL as an actual topic within gender and queer studies. And so my first scholar is Dr. Charlie E. Zhang. He has a more, I'd say, pessimistic, or at the very least, a more Marxist view of BL. This is one of his quotes. It's very jargony and kind of hard to read, but we'll kind of unpack it. He says, the fantasized homo-romanticism cultivated through BL media culture spatializes the urbanity of Bangkok in ways to reposition the city for emerging challenges and opportunities by appealing to the growing international fan group of Thai BL dramas. These drama-created scenes of queerness suggest a cluster of fantasies, aspirations and tendencies that are both transgressive and complicit, plastering pristine image of Thai urbanity while tucking away escalating confrontations underneath mesmerizing queer sceneries. And so essentially what he's saying here is that the Thai boys' love industry, as it's growing in transnational popularity, serves as one of Bangkok's capitalist ventures for it to appeal to tourists and for it to look like a very modernized, progressive, and accepting place. And what he's saying here is that though on the surface, Thai BL is maybe challenging the status quo or challenging homophobia in Bangkok, really what it's doing is ignoring the bigger problems in Bangkok, such as the abuse of transgender prisoners, the lack of marriage equality, and then other forms of systemic discrimination. Ultimately, his argument, though, offers a perspective on Thai BL promotion as physically and materially queerifying Bangkok. So whether or not the physical manifestations of queerness are for capitalist reasons, for marketing reasons, they still materially queer the city, creating to both the domestic and international view of Bangkok as a queer place. And so next we come to my second academic perspective. This comes from Dr. Thomas Bowdenette at Macquarie University in Australia. And his argument is that the Thai BL industry engages in staged homoeroticism as activism to advocate marriage equality and other queer rights. So this is a lot more optimistic perspective. his concept of staged homoeroticism as activism addresses the way in which queer idols of the BL industry simulate queer love in their dramas and in promotions, and in doing so advocate for queer rights. And so I provided some examples here that I think support his argument really well. All the pictures on the bottom are from the show that just came out. It's called Wedding Plan, and it's a show about a lot of different couples getting married. It focuses on like a wedding planner and him falling in love and all that. There is both a male-male and male-female couple. Sorry, a male-male and female-female couple that get married in the show. And so it's basically completely ignoring the fact that marriage equality doesn't yet exist in Bangkok. And I think that this contributes to normalizing the idea of queer marriage online and on TV and in public spaces. And so I think that, especially since we don't often see marriages in BLs, it happens not too often. The fact that this is happening now, I think, sort of reflects the, I guess, want of the Thai population to have marriage equality, and the fact that they see it coming relatively soon. I'll also say it's common for BL actors to simulate romantic relationships with each other in promoting their dramas. So they will sort of pretend, act as though they are in a real romantic relationship online or on TV or in public. And despite this being a marketing strategy, I think that it still normalizes queerness in public spaces. And so whether or not it is intended to be activism, I think that it could be interpreted as a form of activism. So I think that this complicates Zhang's argument that we just saw, that BL engages in problematic representational politics, because BL actors do engage in celebrity activism, whether or not it is their intention to do so. Every scholar that engages with BL agrees that Thai BL matters, because we can see its influence happening in the way that it physically and I guess hypothetically queers Bangkok. There's just a point of contention on whether or not it's real activism or not. Which brings us to the drama that I want to use as a sort of case study, Not Me the series. It came out in 2021. In Thai, it's Khao Ma Shai Pum. And my wife and I watched this earlier this year, and it is the first BL that I've seen that really engages protest. Like a lot of BLs, though they all normalize queerness, there aren't many that directly address and focus on queer youth activism. And this one definitely does so. And so here's just a quick introduction to it. It's a suspense and romance drama, came out in 2021. What's really important about it is that it came directly after the 2020 and 2021 democracy protests, which were, if you didn't know, if you don't remember, the people of Bangkok, primarily young people, students, the working class, they were protesting the monarchy, and they wanted increased democracy. Marriage equality was one of the things that they really wanted. And a lot of them were unfortunately arrested on violating COVID-19 measures, just a way for them to arrest protesters. So this came out as that was happening, essentially. And it focuses on youth activism, identity, trust, and love. And it sets a new precedent for BLs to engage with activism and the obstacles faced by queer and disadvantaged Bangkokians. And so basically to summarize it, it's a really convoluted plot, but it explores the relationship between twin brothers, White and Black, separated for 15 years. White returns to Thailand from Russia to discover that his brother is comatose after a violent attack. White, led to believe that one of Black's close friends may have betrayed him, disguises himself as Black to find the traitor. When White joins Black's small group of radical student activists, Sean, one of Black's friends in the group, becomes suspicious of the differences in White's behavior as he impersonates his brother. The situation leads to emotional and romantic tensions between Sean and White, because it is a BL. And so, also, if you're not familiar with Thai names, their like main name will be like a random English word or name that has been chosen for them by their family, like a nickname, and then they'll have like their legal name and their last name. So names like White and Black would be kind of relatively common. But basically, so here is Sean, the main love interest, White, his twin brother Black, and then the group of friends that is like a group of activists that they joined. And so I have here a few clips that I want to show you guys that I think really engage with activism the most. So go ahead and play these. I guess I should sort of preface this a little bit. The scene, since you don't know any of the characters, in this scene, the protagonist, White, and one of his friends in the activist, student activist group, they go to a protest where a lot of people have gathered to protest this really powerful and influential politician and businessman who is just like very corrupt. His businesses have really bad business practices and discrimination, and he's responsible for like enforced disappearances and drug trafficking. So they're protesting this really terrible guy, and there also are queer activists there supporting the cause and also petitioning for marriage equality. There's going to be a pride show, and so that's basically what's happening.
เป็นเรื่องแก้ไขสมรสเท่าเทียมนะคะ
อ้าวนุ๊กกูมาที่นี่ด้วยเหรอวะแปลกใจดีว่ะ
กลุ่ม LGBT อ่ะเราก็ต้องมาล่ารายชื่อในพื้นที่ที่มีผู้ชุมนุมเยอะๆแบบนี้แหละยิ่งอะไรที่มันเกี่ยวข้องกับพวกสิทธิขั้นพื้นฐานหรือว่าอะไรที่มันไม่เป็นธรรมในสังคมอ่ะยังไงเราก็ต้องมาเนี่ยวันนี้ก็เรื่อง2-3 พันรายชื่อแล้วนะมึงถ้ามึงอยากมาร่วมลงชื่อมึงก็ร่วมลงได้นะเว้ยมีทั้งแบบปกติแล้วก็ออนไลน์ทีนี้ไม่ว่าจะแบบชายหญิงหรือว่าหญิงเราก็จะได้ประโยชน์จากการแก้ไขกฎหมายนี้อย่างเท่าเทียมกันทุกเพศตอนนี้คนส่วนใหญ่อาจจะมองว่ามันไม่ได้จำเป็นเว้ยแต่มึงลองคิดดูนะเว้ยไม่แน่ตัวมึงเองหรือว่าคนรอบข้างมึงอาจจะมันต้องการสิ่งนี้อยู่ก็ได้แล้วมึงลงหรือยังเมียกระเทยมึงเขารออยู่ตั้งนานแล้ว
ลงเลยนะพี่ลาเดี๋ยวจะให้กูกลับไปบ้านแล้วก็เอาไม้หนึ่งที่เลยนะ
มึงมันจริงๆเลย
เฮ้ยกูขอตัวก่อนนะเว้ยกลับแล้วเจอกันไว้หน่อย
เอาวันนี้มึงอยู่ถึงดึกไหมถ้ามึงอยู่ดึกมีโชว์เด็ดๆไฮไลท์เทียบเลย
อะไรวะ
เ
Probably just the parent for So as you can see, it's a lighthearted, but it's a pretty powerful scene. And so first I'll unpack the marriage petition scene. Oh, I thought it was gonna get back into full screen. Okay. So what I really like about the petition scene is that it directly advocates taking action for marriage equality. It advocates petitioning, which is one of the main ways that Thai activists perform their activism, because it is a little bit trickier in Thailand with it being a monarchy to just go out in the streets as a group of people. The government finds that pretty threatening, and so they will often create marriage equality petitions that do have a lot of influence. And also what I love about it is that it makes the argument that queer activism is intersectional. This was not a pride event or a protest specifically advocating marriage equality. It was a protest against a very powerful and corrupt leader that a lot of queer people showed up to and ended up being a sort of pride event, which it's a good reflection of how queer activism in Thailand operates. It is very intersectional. There's a lot of solidarity between activists. And so if you're primarily a anti-monarchy democracy protester and someone else is primarily a queer protester, you're going to be at a lot of the same events because they do show up for each other. And also what makes this first scene really powerful is that it's a trans woman advocating for her community in her own words. And as I touched on a little bit earlier, trans representation in Thailand has not always been good. It's a lot of comedic relief or like really, really sad stories. And so a trans woman advocating for her community and being an activist is not something you see often in Thailand. Sorry, in Thai shows. As far as the fashion show scene goes, what I love about it is a manifestation of queer joy in conjunction with intersectional efforts, like I talked about before, against oppression and corruption. And I think that queer joy in itself is a protest against oppression because it associates queerness with positivity, and especially when it's happening in a really public space, it makes an impact. It sends the message that queerness is not something that's sad or negative or scary. It's something that is positive and happy. So this brings us to our second scene. This is a argument between Black, the twin brother that was formerly comatose, and his friend, heavily insinuated past lover or current lover. It's like a lovers to enemies to lovers situation. It's really weird. But they're having a big disagreement about their values, and they also try to kill each other, kind of. And it's happening primarily in a flashback.
เละว่าอะไรนะมึงเนี่ย
จะได้ชิน
ทะเลาะกับเพื่อนใหม่เปล่าวะ
แม่ฉลองกันใหญ่ ที่สร้างกระแสกดดันไล่อธิการบดีออกไปได้ แต่มันก็ยังไม่จบจริงๆไงในอนาคตไปถามว่าต้องเกิดขึ้นมาอีกเป็นแบบนี้ซ้ำๆถ้าไม่เรียนรู้จากอดีตเนี่ยผมว่าระเบิดแน่ในที
มึงเนี่ยมันมาหลายชั้น
ไอตอนกูมั่นใจแล้วว่าไม่ใช่แค่มึงเลยทำเรื่องพวกนั้น กูเห็นคนที่พยายามทำทุกอย่างให้ดีขึ้น เห็นในสิ่งที่ทุกคนไม่เห็น การเปลี่ยนแปลงมึงลองนึกดูนะ ถ้ามันไม่ใช่แค่เรื่องในมหาลัยอะแต่เราทำให้มันใหญ่ขึ้น เป็นระดับสังคมระดับประเทศ กูเห็นภาพของทุกคนมากมาย ที่ลุกขึ้นมาล้มล้างโครงสร้างเก่า สร้างโลกใบใหม่ที่เป็นโลกของพวกเราจริง
แล้วมันอยู่โปเปียแล้ว มันไม่มีวันเกิดขึ้นจริงหรอกแม่งั้นต้องฆ่าให้ตายไปชั้น
ๆมึงรู้จักมาร์ติน ลูเทอร์ คิงดิที่เขาสู้แบบ non-violence กับ civil disobedience เขายังชนะได้ดิ
แล้วยังไงวะ มาตีดูเรื่องคิงสมมติสุดท้ายแล้วอะก็โดนรอบสังหารนี่กูเป็นห่วงมันนะเว้ยแบบ
กูทำใจมันนะ
เขาตายเพื่อสิ่งที่เขาเชื่อ แล้วยังไงวะ อีก50 ปีต่อมาเบสิกก็ยังมีอยู่เดิมแล้วนี่มันประเทศไทยนะเว้ยมึงสังคมกับบ้านเมืองไม่เหมือนกัน ถ้าเกิดเราจะเปลี่ยนอะไรสักอย่างหนึ่งเราต้องมีอำนาจ
อำนาจเป็นช่อชนไอเดียต่างๆที่จะเปลี่ยนแปลงสังคมได้
มึงไม่ได้มาห้องนี้นานแค่ไหนหรอวะ
ตั้งแต่กูรู้ว่ามึงเชี่ยไม่ต่างจากไอ้ทวี
มึงนี่ยังเหมือนเดิมเลยนะ เชื่อแต่ความคิดตัวเอง น้องมึงกับเพื่อนมึงอะทำดีแล้ว อีกไม่นานทวีก็อยู่ไม่ได้ แล้วอำนาจก็จะไปอยู่กู
อยากให้กูอีกหลบได้ใครหน้าไหนก็หลบได้นั่นแหละอำนาจมันอยู่กับกูไม่นาน
กูรู้อำนาจมันเปลี่ยนไปมาอยู่แล้ว ถ้าไม่เป็นของครอบครัวกูคนอื่นแต่นี่มันที่ของกูไงถ้ากูก็จะมีวันพลาดเหมือนกัน
มึงไม่มีทางดีกว่ามันถ้ามึงมีอำนาจมึงจะกลายเป็นคน
มันเป็นเรื่องปกติอยู่แล้วที่ต้องเป็นแบบนี้เว้ยทุกวันนี้สังคมมันเละเทะไม่เป็นระเบียบไปหมด ถ้าไม่มีคนควบคุมอำนาจมันอาจจะแย่กว่าที่มึงคิดก็ได้นะ
ก็มึงยังเป็นคนคุมมึงเลยพูดแบบนี้
กูจะไปสู้มึงทุกอย่างได้ยังไงวะ ทุกคนในตอนเนี้ยมีสิทธิธรรมทุกอย่างมีอิสระเต็มที่ยกเป็นแค่บางเรื่อง ถ้ามึงไม่เก็บมาคิดมันก็จะไม่เป็นปัญหาของชีวิตมึง มันมีแต่เราจะตกลงกันยังไงถ้าเราอยู่ร่วมกันได้นะมันเป็นอย่างนี้ไปโดยตลอด แล้วก็จะเป็นอย่างนี้ต่อไปอีกนาน มึงยอมรับความจริง แล้วก็ฟังในสิ่งที่กูพูดบ้างเถอะ
So, so this scene doesn't just come out and say it, but it is very, very anti-monarchy. And the language of the scene is subtle. It references democracy protest without being overtly lèse-majesté, because Thailand, especially at this point in time, takes lèse-majesté very, very seriously. And so if you insult the government, if you insult the monarchy, you can get up to 40 years in prison. And so the way that the scene, the way that the dialogue is, Todd's argument is very representative of systems of power that are upheld by the monarchy, that both contribute power to the monarchy and derive a significant amount of power from it. And then Black's argument is representative of the 2021 Thai youth protests that seek to demolish the monarchy in favor of democracy and things like marriage equality that have been they've experienced pushback from the monarchy. And so when he says to demolish the old structure, he means the monarchy, which has been in place for like 800 years. And then he references nonviolence and civil disobedience, which is the ethos of many youth protesters in Thailand and around the world. Also, the quote, "Power is corrupting. Ideas are what have the power to change society." Integrally anti-monarchy, because power is inextricably linked with corruption, and then the expression of ideas through protest are what makes positive change. And so, whereas queer activism isn't referenced specifically in this discussion, the queer subtext suggests that the old structure of the monarchy is a big point of contention for queer ties. And then we have one more scene. This is the final episode. This one I feel like requires a lot of context. So the group of friends that White and Black are in, their group is called ROL, which stands for Rule of Law. They are being kidnapped. They're undergoing enforced disappearance for their activist efforts in trying to take down Celine, the very corrupt politician. He has ordered their enforced disappearance. One of them is shot, and they're currently being transported out of the city.
ไม่ไหวว่ะมันเป็นที่ครับผมว่าเราไปต่อได้เลยครับ
I feel like it's really loud. I don't know if this is gonna do anything.
ไม่ไหวว่ะมันเป็นที่ครับผมว่าเราไปต่อได้เลยครับ มีการไล่เลยเฮ้ย
I So this scene. Enforced disappearances are surprisingly very common in Thailand, despite it being a very overall peaceful, happy place. There's a surprising amount of backlash against protesters, and enforced disappearances are pretty common. So, according to the Human Rights Watch, in September 2022, the Thai government ordered the extension of its nationwide enforcement of the emergency decree on public administration and emergency situation to November 22nd. And that just gave the government the right to restrict fundamental freedoms, especially protest. And this was the 14th extension since March 2020. So throughout the times the protests were happening, they just kept extending this Emergency Situation Act under the guise of COVID-19 safety measures. And so a lot of people were charged with violating COVID-19 safety measures, and there were also a lot of sedition charges. And then the United Nations Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances has recorded 91 cases of enforced disappearance in Thailand from 1980 to 2022. And so we have a history of the Thai government's suppression of dissent that isn't often represented in the media or talked about a lot at all. It's something that's very much that they want to sweep under the rug, that this show is sort of bringing to light. And what I think is cool is that if you haven't watched the show in full, a lot of times you won't notice it. But this is probably partially because they have limited background actors. But the same crowd that gathered for the marriage equality protests were the same people that came and intervened in their enforced disappearance. And so I think that this again references intersectionality and solidarity of Thai activists.
So what exactly is enforced disappearance? Are they getting moved out of Thailand, or are they going to get killed, or?
They're getting offed.
Okay.
For the most part, because it's not technically the government that does it sometimes, but like a government official will strongly suggest to one of his hitmen or like whatever that he wants someone to be offed. And then like while protests are happening, it's easy during the shuffle of everything for protesters to get like pulled out and then escorted out of the city in vans, nepotism. So this brings me to my conclusion, which is, in recent years, the Thai BL genre has served as a queer reflection of contemporary Thailand, projected both inward to young Thais and outward towards an international audience. Whether addressing pertinent social issues or simply portraying queer relationships, love and joy in mainstream media, boys' love dramas reimagined Bangkok as a queer space, thus serving as a form of activism to reflect and potentially inspire activist efforts on the ground in Thailand. And though not every BL is like Not Me is kind of the only BL that engages protest to that extent, there are a lot of BLs that will reference marriage equality petitions, A character will suggest that other characters sign a marriage equality petition. And also there are BLs in which queer couples are married. And so even the BLs with the fluffiest of plots that have actually no substance whatsoever, through their normalization of queerness within Bangkok, and then of course the advertisements you can see all around Bangkok of BL couples or BL actors promoting promoting products with a queer subtext. It all contributes to a queering of Bangkok and ultimately pushes them closer to marriage equality through normalization of queerness. And pictured here are a lot of BL celebrities who showed up to Pride and showed their support. Some of them openly queer, some of them ambiguous. But it's very common for BL actors and people within the BL industry to show up in support for the queer community in Thailand. So thank you all for attending this presentation. And so if there are any questions or any thoughts, I would love to hear them. But if not, I'll pass it over to her.
Okay, so I assume these are profitable. This is not cheap looking. I mean, these are this is good quality filming, good quality acting. So these are not cheap to make. So are they financing their productions through this advertising?
Yes.
Is that the main?
So there are like 3 to 4 big BL production companies, the biggest being GMM TV, and they make their BL content through their sister company GMM 25, and they are just a big sort of entertainment conglomerate, not nearly as big as Disney, but they have a lot of funding to make the BLs that they make. Not Me came from that company, but they do a lot of they have a lot of sponsorships, and I made the YouTube videos start after the ads that they had done, because they're on YouTube, so they have ads, but they also have ads in Thai in the shows that are sometimes the actors themselves promoting products. So that is definitely a big source of revenue for them, and even more so for smaller companies.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important for them to get those.
I mean, I don't know anything about Thai cinema or anything like that, but so I assume most of the stuff is being distributed, electronically, YouTube, things like that. So the advertising is the main revenue stream for these.
So no big boycott like Bud Light or anything, right? I mean, that's, they don't go off the deep end like here.
Yeah. No, that doesn't happen often in Bangkok, because even the people who are homophobic in Bangkok, it's not the boycott kind. It's like, oh, I wish I wouldn't see queer people on the street, and I wish they wouldn't have marriage equality. But basically every company in Thailand works with BL couples and companies that produce BL shows. So there's really, if you boycott things, you're just not going to have anything. Yes.
This may be way outside the scope of your research, Celine, so I apologize if it is. But I'm just really interested. So a little bit of background. My dad actually grew up in Laos in Thailand. And as a result, spoke Thai fluently and used to do translation work when I was growing up. And the slang term in my household, my father is very homophobic. And so the slang term in my household for any person he didn't like, explicitly any queer person, anytime that he was upset about queerness, was always katui. It was very explicitly a very derogatory term, much more akin to the F word here, right? And it was very clear that was the intent.
Right.
And then I was also thinking about, the ways in which ladyboys weren't really a thing yet, obviously, but they became more of a thing, and the way in which that kind of absorption of that model or that understanding of queer culture in Thailand also reinforces this association of Thailand very much since, the late 50s, when my dad was there in the late 50s and early 60s, all the way up through the present of Thailand with queerness from an international scale, but not always positively, right? So we have this kind of derogatory term, we have the association of queer tourism with ladyboys, and then now we've got these sorts of BL dramas being a very different model. But I'm just wondering, because you touched on this idea of the international audience and how important that is, like what has this done to reframe or reshape not just queerness in Thailand, because I think that maybe was always there from an international perspective, but a positive association with queerness rather than this seedy underbelly derogatory association with queerness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so how have BLs reframed what queerness looks like in Thailand, or how?
Or the association, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, the association from the kind of negative, seedy underbelly association from an international audience to this more positive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I've seen, basically comparing the 1980s and then 2000s wave with BL that we see today, Thai BLs, they're still like very Thai in tone, very integrally Thai. Like,
Yeah.
Kayla and I kind of joke sometimes about how like Thai shows just have a very Thainess about them that's like kind of silly, but then like serious at the same time. But BLs are, I would say, sort of a foreign type of media that has been adopted in Thailand because BLs came from Japan.
Yeah.
And so I think that what really sets apart Thai BLs from other previous Thai queer cinema is that it's just very, it's very polished and it's very oriented internationally. So like the actors are gonna look perfect. They're gonna look like young, and one of them is probably going to be somewhat effeminate depending on, which BL it is. That's gonna typically be a trope. But of course the Thai queer cinema before BLs, before like 2014, it was either katois who were, varying levels of femininity, but, ranging from cis passing to not even identifying as a trans person.
Right.
And then you have movies like Tropical Malady that came out in 2004, which are very, very masculine men, very adult men. They don't look young. They don't look polished. They just look like guys. And so I would say that like the way that Thai BLs influence the international view of queerness in Thailand is that it sort of does create a fantasy image as Thailand as being this place where there are these beautiful queer men, some queer women. GL is a genre that is just now like starting in Thailand. But there's these beautiful queer men, and they lead these beautiful queer lives. And so I would say that certainly Thai BLs contribute to the international view of Bangkok as a queer fantasy. And we especially see this, I can't speak so much to like American perception because Thai BLs still aren't really in the mainstream here. But especially like in Singapore queer men just go to Bangkok all the time if they have the money for it, because it's a much more open place than Singapore. And so definitely within Asia and Southeast Asia and a little bit in South Asia, Bangkok is their queer paradise. But I guess I know less about like how Americans and Europeans as a whole view Thai queerness.
Yeah, and I guess my question was more about like this idea that it's always been queer, but the positive association, right, has really changed. It's really interesting to see this very positive association with queerness being so open. That's great. No, I appreciate that. also appreciate you mentioning a lot of the distinctions between the Japanese BL and the Thai BL. You know, one of the other things that's really striking to me is this doesn't seem to be marketed to women in the same way that the Japanese BL is, and really does seem to embrace genuine like queerness, right, rather than heterosexual kind of feminine ideals or fantasies in a really different way. So it was really interesting to see those examples.
Yeah, I'll also say I talked with Zach Smith on this exact topic, and he talked about how Japanese BLs, like for the most part, Japanese men don't like Japanese BLs, and they don't like the representation that comes from them because they're typically problematic relationships, like some statutory rape and like a lot of that stuff. And it's also like you said, very much oriented towards women, like Japanese women's and international women. What the BL producers feel is their fantasy, they're going to put it in there. So it's not for queer men at all. But Thai BLs are a very different case.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Oh, question.
Yeah.
As GLs start to take off, do you think that they'll have as much of a marketing influence as the BLs have?
Unfortunately, probably not. Just because like women never get anything.
I don't know where you are.
We have like one actual Thai GL, basically.
Which won a bunch of awards.
It won a bunch of awards
last year.
They had a lot of sponsorships, but it's not nearly the same impact, or it not nearly as popular as Thai BLs. But maybe in the future, I'm really hoping that GLs will take off and that they'll get good plots, and so I'm hoping that they'll become as like influential and popular as Thai BLs. But they are not currently at that speed.
I mean, there's a certain amount of weaponizing of affluence, I think, that's going on here. And as men are the primary ones wielding the power and wielding the financial influence like that, I think it's important, though, to see, right, upper class time in these dramas, that this is not just something that's in the alleys and in the back streets, right? They're in nice hotels, they're in fancy places, they wear nice clothing. I mean, these are objectively beautiful men, right? And dress that way and act that way, and normalizing that kind of portrayal of queerness is certainly perhaps the only way. And I keep thinking of American sort of parallels, and I have a hard time seeing a drama show on Netflix about a couple that meets during the Black Lives Matter protests, right? We don't do drama in that way because our cinema is so corporatized and so sanitized in that way. That's why we transform those stories into science fiction, right, and into other genres that sort of sidestep the drama aspects that these Thai stories just go head first into.
And
That's
I would say,
incredibly
like,
brave.
Not Me is an exceptional BL. There are some BLs that are just like, they take place in like a school, and it's these like middle upper class young men that fall in love, and there's really nothing else that happens. So like, not all of them are like Not Me, but all of them do. I think that all Thai BLs ultimately are pretty good representation, whether or not they're meant to be activism.
So you presented these two academic perspectives, opposing ones, on Thai BL marketing specifically, and one was optimistic and one was pessimistic. I was wondering which one of those views you would lean more towards, because my first reflex was the optimistic view is basically saying, capitalism or not, this is still queerifying, maybe if that's a word, these spaces, all like where the advertisements are. It's just making them queer, this public acceptance, it's normalizing it.
Right.
And the criticism, I mean, I don't know, especially when Zhang was saying, oh, well, all this Thai BL marketing when we could be focusing on all these other systemic issues? I mean, I think we should be talking about mutual exclusion. You can do Thai BL, pro queer marketing, and also have, resources to take care of separate systemic issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with the second, more optimistic argument. Primarily because, like, I see where the first one is coming from. Absolutely, it's attacking the capitalist aspects of the Thai BL industry that are absolutely there. But like you said, commodifying queerness is not, I guess, mutually exclusive with queering a place. Like, just because queerness is sometimes commodified in ads and promotions and all that stuff, it's still queerness that is being portrayed, like, online or on TV or in public spaces, and normalizes queerness. And everything is commodified because we live in a capitalist society.
It's the ultimate form of acceptance, right?
And the biggest thing that turned me off about John's argument, I didn't include it here because it just wasn't relevant, but his main argument for basically BL's bad is because you don't see BL ads and BL promotion in the slums of Bangkok, but also you don't see much promotion or ads at all in the slums of Bangkok because that's not where the money is coming from. So I appreciate his argument. I just think that he was a bit biased against BL in a way that's not exactly fair to the way that BL contributes to queering Bangkok.
Yeah, and just to jump on that, yeah, such good points. And commodifying, Thai BL is a little more organic than, say, like, brand changes their social media icon to a rainbow. Like, you went through these waves of film. Like, this is a thing that has existed. So really leaning on the marketing is just, it's a little more organic in terms of you're just appreciating more something that Thailand has always had.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you're good. Celine, thank you.